Good. So I want to start with a verse this morning from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, I think. Yeah, verse 16. Paul's just talking about all the persecution and trouble that he's experiencing. And he says, "Therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us far more exceeding an eternal weight of glory, while we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal." So he talks about what you can see in this time-space world, and then he talks about a world beyond that, or things that you can't see, or he talks about a world of form. I kind of talked about this, but more in the second service last week. He talks about a world of form and name, and a world that has no change, that isn't subject to change, that's eternal, right? Then he relates the outward man to the temporal world, the things which are seen, and the inward man to the eternal world, the things which are not seen, and then says, basically, we fix our attention not on things which are seen or the temporal or the form, but we fix our attention on things which are not seen. Right? So, some really basic principles, but I want you to just kind of work with me a little bit this morning on this idea that you have an outward man or person, not trying to be gender, exclusive, whatever. Chauvinist. Yeah, that's it. That's the word I was looking for. I want you to get kind of anchored into this idea, or work with this idea, or play with this idea, that you have an outward person and you have an inward person. And they're different. The outward person relates to what's out here. The inward person relates to eternal spiritual realities. The outward person is perishing, right? The inward person is being renewed day by day. And then where's your attention? Because you have to have both. The actual goal is for there to be an aligning of both the inner person and the outer person. Or ultimately for what's in the inner person to find expression in the outer person and in the outer world. So most spiritual traditions put the outer person, especially Christianity, put the outer person and the inner person at war with each other. Yes. And almost to the point of you have to eradicate one and exalt the other, right? That's not really the goal. Trust me, I tried it for too many decades. The goal is to harmonize the two together and allowing that there to be a flow then from that which is eternal to that which is temporal, right? Now, obviously, we live in a world, and when I talk about the world, I'm not talking about the physical world. I'm talking about the philosophies, the way we organize, structure, and think as a society, the collective consciousness of our society. When I'm talking about the world, that's what I'm talking about, right? So we live in a world that has a highly developed outward man and almost no schematic whatsoever for an inward man, not that's agreed upon, not where there's any kind of consensus. So we have a lot of consensus on external things. If you drive a car, you're right? Now, if you're Amish, you haven't joined that yet. You have a different set of agreements. It's an important point to make. So outwardly, we have a lot of agreements. We have a lot of things that we disagree on outwardly, but for a lot of our lives, we have these sort of agreements that we've made. And so we have a way of thinking. Our outward person has a way of thinking that's based on the conditioning of this world and the functioning of this world, right? And for a lot of us, that is linear thinking, logical thinking, right? Let me give you an example of, this is kind of interesting, but I'll give you an example of how much the collective consciousness invades you subconsciously and affects you, all right? If I did a thought experiment with you and asked you to imagine something, think about something, and then pay very, very careful attention to how your brain presents that image or thought to you. Here's what I mean by paying careful attention. Not just the content, but the structure of it. So if I were to say to you something as simple as imagine an apple. Get a picture of an apple in your mind, right? Then I would want to know, when you see that apple, where in your field of vision do you see it? Is it right in front of you here? Is it down here? Is there a hand holding it? Is it floating in the air? Is it clear? Is it fuzzy? You get it? But for the most part, where's the location of it? Now, if I were to take inventory with the group, you might think everybody would have it right here because you've got it right here, but you might be shocked to find out that people have it at various different locations in their mind. They did not choose that. It just randomly, spontaneously occurred. Got it? Now, if I were to ask you to remember what you did 2 weeks ago, remember maybe you went out with a friend, went to lunch, maybe you had an encounter, something that impressed you in the last 2 weeks. And I were to say, remember that event, if you would pay careful attention to how you present that event to yourself, it would have a location in your mind. Now if I said, remember, I don't know, something that happened in 2012. Something significant maybe happened for you in 2012. And you conjure up that event, what you'll notice is it's in a different location. And if I were to say, remember your 16th birthday, you would discover that's in an even different location. What you would discover, though, is that your sense of where that event is moving along a line. So in other words, if you put past events a little bit to the left, chances are really good, like 99%, that the further back you go in time, the more to the left it's going to be. Now, other people put the past behind them. And if I were to ask that, they would have a sense of retrieving something from back there. Are you breathing? I could have done it more simple. I could have said, everybody close your eyes and now point to where you see the future. And maybe you see the future in front of you. That's typically how I am. So I might point in front of myself and then have you open your eyes, and you might be shocked to discover that some people are pointing this way, some people are pointing diagonally, because your mind organizes time in a linear fashion. Now, the other thing that's interesting, what you can tell about a person by the way they organize time, if their timeline is out here, Pam, tell me if I'm right, maybe left to right or something like this. This person is very conscious of time, wants to be on time, doesn't like to be late, wants things to end on time, because that's their relationship with time. Am I right? Someone else, maybe more like Stephanie, definitely more like myself, if you see the future in front of you, you're tend to be more in the moment. So this is a person who shows up late and doesn't realize that it bothers other people. This is a person who can get lost in doing something for hours and then be like, oh my gosh, 5 minutes went by. Am I right? I see Stephanie nodding her head, so I'm curious, Stephanie, where do you see the future? Yeah, she's pointing straight ahead. Because these are patterns about the way that we think and organize just about time. Got it? Now here's the really interesting thing. You've heard the stories, I'm sure, about people who go to Africa. Africa is a good example of this. Now, the thing about Africa, particularly Kenya, which is where I've spent most of my time, virtually all my time. The thing about Kenya is it's very westernized, or it's becoming more and more westernized. So they're adopting Western principles. But one of the things they would tell us when we would go over there, they would tell us the meeting was going to start at such and such time, and we'd have to ask the question, is that Kenya time or kingdom time? Because for them, kingdom time meant we're going to keep our word, it's going to start when we say it's going to start, it's going to end when we say it's going to end. Never ended when they said it was going to end, but that's beside the point. They tried, but they start on time. Kenya time would be the meeting starts at 10, and maybe they don't pick you up for the meeting until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And maybe the meeting starts at 5 or 6 o'clock. I'm not even exaggerating. Because they have a completely different relationship with time that is non-linear. So why does the West have a linear relationship with time and a place like Africa, not so much? We assign value to time. Why do we assign? When did we start assigning so much value to time? Any ideas? Thank you. The Industrial Revolution. When you had an assembly line and you had to show up on time and be at your place on time, and there was a certain timing to how things went together, all of a sudden now, because of our values, we start organizing time according to, seriously, assembly lines, timelines, linear structure. Now, probably you took it for granted that time was just linear. Your outward person did, for sure. Right? But the ancients would not think of time as linear at all. They would think of it as a circle and a cycle. Because your week is a cycle. Your seasons are cycles. And so let me ask you the question. When you think about time from a scientific perspective, the earth rotating around the sun, the moon, month, rotating around the earth, from that perspective, is time linear or is it a circle? It's circular. So welcome to the world of the map is not the territory. The way you map time is not necessarily the way time is. And if we could think of time more in terms of cycles and circles and renewals, probably we'd have a lot less stress about time. And it's probably why people tend to live longer in parts of the world that have, like Tibet, and places that haven't been impacted by the Industrial Revolution. You're more likely to die of a disease that you don't have a cure for in those parts of the world than you are from old age or the stress of it. Are you tracking with me? Now, what linear time gives us is a lot of economic power that you don't see in other places that don't operate in time in that same way. Just kind of letting that sink in a little bit. That can really be disorienting when you realize so much of what we take for granted as being real is just perception and mental organization that then is reinforced by the culture around us. And that's how our outward man operates. See it? Now, here's the other problem. All right, so we talked about outward man, inward man a little bit. So you can think about outward man living in time. That's why I did the timeline thing. But the inward person does not have a concept of time. Which is why if you relate to time this way. And there's no right or wrong, by the way. What's nice is to have the flexibility to know how to shift it. If you want to enjoy a moment, you can shift your timeline this way and just be in the moment and enjoy it. If you need to get something organizationally done, you can shift your... that just disorients me every time I do that. You can shift your timeline this way and look at life or look at the event, and you will be more objective in regards to time. Because it's not going through your inner person, and your inner person relates to what? Eternity, and eternity exists in the ever-present now. If you want to be in a flow and in the moment, you shift it back. There's ways to do that, but anyway, that was all free. You doing okay? All right, so the inward person relates to a different realm. The inward person relates to the eternal realm. The inward person relates to what we might call the spiritual realm, or what Paul calls the unseen realm. Now, here's the really important part. The seen world, or the world of the outer man, and the unseen world, or the world of the inner person, do not function and operate at all by the same rules, principles, concepts, or agreements. And if we don't understand that, we will take one mind and try to apply it in the wrong arena, and then that's why we get messed up. So the person who's just trying to be super spiritual is just all about their inner person, has discovered spirituality, has discovered there's a world out there, has discovered God or whatever, and they just, you've heard the saying, become so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. You particularly see this in Christianity with the mystical Christian glory bunch. Think about it. Some of the glory bunch, like, they're just, everything is a spiritual experience. You can't even go up to them and say, hey, how's your day been? Without them falling on the floor and shaking or going, woo, or, having some kind of spiritual, super spiritual something. We all know these people. But they have a very difficult time maintaining life out here. Difficult time with money, difficult time with relationships, difficult time with people skills, whatever the case may be, right? Yes? That's not most people's problem. Most people's problem is they've been so preconditioned and spent so much time out here that they try to take the rules of the way their logical mind understands things, operate in the temporal world, in the seen world, in the outer world, and they try to apply those same principles to what's coming from the inner world. Right? So, for example, if you want an example of this, your dream life, when you dream, obviously, your physical outward person has shut down, right? Now, from certain clinical perspectives, all that's going on in your dreams is your brain is sort of digesting all the stuff you put in it throughout the day or whatever, right? I would argue if that's the case, if your dreams were merely the byproduct of your external world, then your dreams would operate on the same principles that the external world operates on, and you wouldn't be able to fly in your dream, and you wouldn't be able to do all kinds of weird stuff, like being underwater. Weirdest dream I ever had. Being underwater, talking to cows that are also underwater, while the cows are eating Chinese food out of a box with chopsticks. I had that dream. Michelle, we can talk about that later. You can psychoanalyze me. But you get it. I mean, that's like the most radical example. But do you see what I'm saying? They don't operate on those same principles, right? So your inner person does not operate with any of that kind of linear, logical, empirical kind of thinking. But you have a vast resource of wisdom and knowledge and ability that comes from your inner person. In fact, if what Paul says is true, that your inner person is being renewed day by day, that your inner person is connected to that which is eternal, and that your outward man is connected to that which is temporal and that which is perishing, you have an eternal resource flowing to you at every given moment from your inner person. Everything you need to know about everything is there. Every ability to produce change is there. Let's let that sink in for a minute. The problem is not that it's not there. The problem is not God is there. The vastness, everything. There is a correspondence, I believe, in your inner person to everything that exists. Like a hologram. You know the deal is with hologram, right? No matter how small you take the film, it still has the entire image in the film. It's imprinted everywhere. So inside of you is an imprint or an image or a correspondence, if you will, a corresponding reality to everything that is. That's eternal. You have a vast resource. The problem is your eyes are fixed out here, or your attention. Your attention is drawn out here, and you had, in the physical world, parents, society, education, everything that nurtured you to know how to operate out here, so you're comfortable with that. When you start to go into the realm of the inward person, it's like soul surfing without an instructor. You get out there with your surfboard and try to ride a wave, and you don't even know where the wave is coming from, or how to get up on it, or how to keep your balance and not get knocked off. Am I right? So the first thing we have to do is understand, when I start engaging that world, it does not operate like this world out here. And then the second thing we have to do is begin to honor the intuitive ways of knowing. You could look at it this way. The objective outer mind is generally operating on a masculine principle. Now remember, I'm looking at masculine and feminine not as gender, but as polarities of energies. So the masculine energy is that which takes initiative, that which sort of forces its way into something to produce change, right? Exercises power, releases power. How's that? The feminine principle is that which is receptive. Think of a cup, the Grail, the symbol of the Grail in the King Arthur legends. It's that which gets poured into, right? It's softer, it's more delicate, it's receptive, it's not forceful, gentle, nurturing, incubating. You get it? So the intuitive ways of knowing definitely operate off of that feminine principle. Because you're being receptive, the first thing you need if you're going to navigate that world is knowledge. You need a guide. Are you breathing? So how do you connect with those things? See, what happens is we get intuitions, we sense energetically presence, the presence of something or someone around us. We have visions, we have flashes of insight, we have gut knowings, And those things come to us, and if we're too conditioned to the outward person says, oh, that can't be right. That can't be the way that is. That's just your imagination. That's just the pizza you had last night. Whatever, right? So you discount those gentle nudges, those little ways of knowing. Or you want it so bad, you march in like Rambo in the spiritual world. You're going to get, I'm going to get this. I am going to get the spiritual gifts operating. I am going to find union with God. I am going to contact my spirit guide. I am going to contact my spirit guide, damn it. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to see images in my mind. I'm going to use my imagination to enter the spirit like Aaron's been teaching. I'm going to do it right now. I can't see anything but black. Come on, I've got to do it. So you're using the wrong energy, which is why meditation is so important. To get in this place, you have to let go and be receptive. See, the inward man is renewed. The outward man is perishing. So if you could think about it, if you strike something against something, what happens? Something breaks, right? Or there's wear and tear. So the outward man is moving in this force, this energy, moving forward, getting up every day, facing every day, working hard, fighting for their rights, whatever the case may be. And it creates this wear and tear, perishing. Got it? So the inward man, what? Is being renewed daily. So that is a receiving mode. That is not something that you do by force. So the key then is to be able to let go of the logical, linear mind and put yourself in a receptive place without fear. And that's the problem. Be able to put yourself in a receptive place without fear. Because we've been told there's scary stuff out there. If you get out there too far, you're going to lose your mind. What if your intuitions aren't right? I hate to tell you this, but your logic isn't right half the time either. You've just been taught to depend on it more. So you can't operate by force. You have to operate there by gentleness and by letting go and letting whatever happens happen when you engage with that. And then as you pick things up, you acknowledge them. I'm sensing, like when I walked in the room this morning, I could sense a very strong energetic presence. I could just sense it. So you acknowledge that, right? The more you acknowledge those things, the more you condition yourself to give attention to those things. If you think someone, let's see, I say this. If you think one of your ancestors, one of your parents who's gone on, has contacted you because there's a sense or there's a familiarity, or oftentimes people will just smell something that reminds them of that person. Instead of that, just thinking, oh, that must just be a random memory, you can connect and lean into that and say that there's contact there, and my intuitive ways of knowing have picked up on that, and you can lean into it. Make sense? So first thing we got to let go is trying to force it. Here's the second thing we have to let go of when it comes to honoring this part of the inner man. Trying to prove it. Because proving it is empirical, at least in our way of thinking. When we say prove it, we want verifiable, almost scientific empirical proof, which means we're trying to take the laws that operate out here and apply them over here. So here's what I mean by that. If somebody's trying to develop their psychic abilities or their prophetic abilities, whatever label you put on it, I don't really care, spiritual gifts, whatever you want to call it. And so they want to do this exercise. I want to develop my psychic abilities, so I want to know what color shirt Mike's going to wear today. These are the kind of exercises you get in books and stuff, or prophetic conferences. I want to know what color shirt Mike's going to wear, so I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to see Mike, and I see Mike in an orange shirt. Yeah, that makes sense because he likes to wear orange. Okay, Mike's going to be wearing an orange shirt, and then I show up at church and Mike's wearing a gray shirt. And what do? I start doubting my ability to tap into extrasensory perceptions. Why? Because I'm relating too much that world to this world. You ever get an impression when you're driving that you should just go a different route? Or ever find yourself just spontaneously taking a different route? You're like, why did I take that route? Sometimes it can happen spontaneously because when you're driving, as a general rule, it's just the way it is. Scary, but it's the way it is. Your outward person kind of goes into the background and you're thinking about the song that you're singing or, right? And it's just, you're driving almost on autopilot. That actually is a subtle state of meditation where you're disengaged from the outward person and the inward person is able to come forth. And so then you think, oh, I should go this route today. And you just kind of take it, right? Or you spontaneously end up going a different direction. And maybe you have the thought, I wonder if my intuition, I'm going to follow my intuition. My intuition tells me I should go this route. And so you take that route and you think to yourself, maybe I missed a car accident. But you can never know. Maybe you're checking the scanner, police scanner or something. Was there an accident on that? I mean, that's a silly example, but you see what I'm saying? It's like, if I'm going to start following these nudges and these intuitions and these visions and these, dare I say, voices, I want empirical proof. If I see an angel, I want someone else in the room to see the angel, and I want to make sure we see him the same way and describe him the same way. You see how we mess ourselves up? Instead of honoring those things within ourselves and honoring the power of our own subjective experience, it's got to be like someone else out here. So I try to emulate what someone else out here has done. That's why I don't like to share experiences too much, because then all we do is we gather around someone else's experience and try to emulate it, and then they try to teach us how to have the same experience that they had, and guess what you're doing? You're functioning in the outward person, not even touching the inward person. Make sense? So you can start honoring those things within yourself, and then you can measure your outcomes in terms of the fruit that starts showing up in your life, the synchronicities that start showing up in your life. Like when you let go, quit trying so hard, and you just follow some of those inward nudges, some of the things you've been wanting to have happen just begin to happen through synchronicities. You want a different job. You just happen to meet somebody who knows somebody who can land you the job that you want. But while you're trying and stressing and struggling and trying to, I got to get another job, I got to get another job, I got to get another job, I got to get another job. What are you doing? You're operating in the outward man. You're not even touching the inward realm. But if you relax and let it go, and let your inner man, your spirit man, go to work on it, by receiving, not forcing, then all of a sudden, within 3 weeks, you meet somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who saw your resume and whatever, and you get a phone call, you didn't even apply for the job, and they say, hey, so-and-so told me about you, and I think I want to hire you. Like, wow, look at those synchronicities that came together. And that's how you can kind of begin to test things out. Now, one caution here is this. In order to make healthy contact with the unseen world, you have to do your own shadow work. Because the moment you start listening to voices and impulses and impressions that are coming from within is the moment all the parts of you that you have rejected and exiled say, oh, there's light. Think about it this way. Well, your shadow, we've talked about this, right? Your shadow self is all the parts of you that somewhere along the way you deemed were unacceptable. So unacceptable that you sent a signal to your mind to say, don't show me that part of myself. So they become exiles that are living in darkness. That's why it's the shadow, right? Now imagine if you were a real person that's been living in the dark and you're imprisoned, basically. You're like the Count of Monte Cristo or the Man in the Iron Mask or whatever, right? And all of a sudden, someone brings a light, someone that can help. What's going to happen? You're going to be like, hey, here I am. Which is why when most people start on the spiritual path, it's a disaster. Because you have to, in the Bible it says that God is surrounded by darkness, that God dwells in unapproachable light, but that he's surrounded by a veil of darkness. And you have to be able to pass through that darkness. You have to have safe passage. Make sense? So if you have a bunch of exiles and they start piping up saying, hey, here I am, they can absolutely trick and fool you. And you can think you're following the voice of God. You can think you're following the voice of your inward person. You can think that you're connecting to the realities of that which is eternal. But most of the time, everything you're getting is relating to what's out here. And that's one of the ways you can tell the difference. When everything you're hearing and every impulse and everything is about life out here and connecting to life out here, more than likely, those are your exiles speaking to you and not really something that's coming from that which is divine in the purest sense. Now, that doesn't make it wrong or make them evil or make them bad. It's just information. It's stuff that needs to be sorted out. I mean, it's okay. You get an impulse to do something, but if you keep following that same impulse and that same voice, and it's not leading you to inward renewal, it's not leading you to wholeness, it's not leading you to joy and happiness, you might want to think twice about following that same thing down that same dark alley again to rendezvous with whatever. Make sense? But one of the ways you can tell the difference is when it's connecting, everything's connecting to what's going on in your life right now. In terms of your outer person, you haven't really opened up to the deeper realms of the spirit yet. And that's okay. But you'll never get there if you don't honor. Now, it's a mixture. Not everything. You can have a lot of intuitive light, a lot of knowledge, a lot of revelation, a lot of renewal, a lot of ability, a lot of wisdom, a lot of synchronicities coming from your inward person, and still have your shadow showing up every now and then as well. But as long as you think your shadow is something to be afraid of, something to judge, something to fix, something to heal, something to change, you're applying the same pressure, same judgment that created it as an exile in the first place. Shadow is not something to be changed. Your shadow is something to be loved. And through the power of love, it heals. And the energy transmutes into its highest expression. So rage that you've been suppressing, that has become destructive in your life, when you can love that rage, you can raise it to its highest vibration, where you have the energy of a spiritual warrior that says, I am going to express my authentic self no matter how much pressure from the culture comes towards me to push me back into the box. then I'm able to use that energy to stand in my power and create my path. And that same energy that was manifesting as rage when it was locked as an exile in the shadow, and now has been loved, has been transformed and exalted and brought to its highest point, to where now I can express in a way that brings creativity to my path rather than destruction to my life and others. Leviathan is only destructive when he's in the sea. But when God in Job 41 harnesses Leviathan and brings him out of the water, he shows Job his beauty. Namaste. Have a good afternoon. God bless you.